5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
You're listening to Tabletop and Beyond with your host, Justin.
But before we get started, how was your Geek Week?
And co-hosts Dan and Jason.
You have to be willing to let the dice help you tell the story.
Okay, look, this year I'm going to stop mispronouncing words. Join us as we cover board games to war games and beyond.
And welcome back to Tabletop and Beyond. This is the Talkin' Warhammer segment. We are grateful to have you listening to us today. I've got a very special guest with us today. He is captain of Team America for the World Championship. He's co-captain of the Left Coast Corsair Wargaming team. He's well known in the West Coast gaming circles and all throughout the United States. Welcome, Jeremy Veysseire.
Hi.
Did I say that right? Probably not.
It's Veysseire, but don't worry about it. It's close enough. That's the.
That's my French. I speak French a little bit, and I was getting it wrong though.
It's all good. Like it's a byproduct of growing up in the United States as a French guy. You're just like you've made peace with the fact that no one will pronounce your very long consonant, letter name. So don't worry about it.
Yeah, well, Jeremy, thank you again for coming on the show. I'm very excited to have you. I've actually wanted to have you on the show for a while because I was watching the build-up to the World's Championship, which we're going to talk a little bit about today. And then it was solidified when you took second place in the ACO, that just the Atlantic City Open that was just happened, and I'm like, oh my gosh, we got to get him on here. So, welcome to the show. We're glad to have you.
I'm glad to be here. Now, always
very good.
Always make time to preach the choir of Team America. So get people in the know. We all perfect timing. We're about to open registration to join the team. So. Or at least, try do the whole do the whole testing period to see if you can get on the team. So I look forward to it.
That's very cool. I want to dive into all of that. One of the things that I did not mention that I cannot go by without mentioning, but you are also a contributor on the In Your Face Media, which is a podcast, and I believe you guys have a website too. There's articles and things like that, right?
We have a website. I don't know if it hasn't been in the article for a while, but we mostly. Okay. Our podcast is a long form, once a month podcast instead of kind of like the weekly thing. We tried the weekly thing, but because we have so many different contributors, it just made more sense to have a monthly one. But it's called In Your Face. You can find us in most podcasts, and then we also have a YouTube channel, and it's just literally called In Your Face.
Oh, very cool.
In Your Face Media, and it's just mostly the shows basically being edited and and led by the mastermind John Feuerhelm from also the Corsairs. So,
and our savvy listeners that have been with us from the beginning will recognize Jeremy because we were on their show when it was the Wide World of Wargaming back in the day, and John also came back onto our show to kind of do a cross contribution thing, which was a good time. I think I need to reach out back to him and link up because we had a good time together.
Oh yeah, I mean you can't beat John. He has stories that will just blow your mind all the time. So you gotta he's got that kind of uncle sit down son, I'm gonna tell you a story vibe. So
yeah, totally. Oh, that's good stuff. So before we get into everything, what are you working on right now? What's on your hobby table?
Well, I just came back from ACO, and when we're recording this podcast right now, we just got kind of the leaks for the new GHB. So I'm kind of put all my projects on pause and figuring out what the hell do I do next? Because
right, yes,
because a lot of the game has changed drastically, and it's I have my own opinion about where the game is going, and everybody for a while nobody knows. That's the first, I think it's the first time I've seen a GHB be so controversial. So I know we're not going to spend too much time talking about that. But for the most part, what's on my hobby table right now is a splash of Sylvaneth. It's a splash of KO. It's a splash of Soulblight. I don't know where I'm going.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, you're just like, well, zombie dragon, I guess I'm just going to put you aside because monsters aren't a thing anymore, right? So, speaking of the controversy, right, like everybody's looking at this. The thing is we all knew it was going to kind of happen, right? We knew that, like, this was the season of monsters. When the season changes, we knew that, like, everyone's going to buy all these monsters, and then we're just going to have to put those toys on the shelf and do something different. I actually thought it was going to be like cavalry or like elite troops or something like that. I was kind of surprised to see it was battle line. It's as hard as it is now, I guess. So
yeah.
Maybe I'm not that surprised. I don't know.
We always knew the monster thing was going to end. What I wasn't prepared for was and I don't want to detract too much from the topic, was how drastically changed the game is around battle tactics and grand strategies. That was the shocker to me.
Oh yeah. That's actually a really good point, because like you look at these battle tactics and I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing anymore.
Yeah.
Especially with the monsters, you're like, okay, well, run them all up together and get that battle tactic.
Yeah.
And I mean, like you kind of had a plan for them, and this is gonna take some play testing. Which, with the Nova Open around the corner, do you come out for the Nova Open?
Yeah, I mean, I'm playing for the Invitational as well, so I'm going to be...
Oh, yeah. Oh, very good. Very cool. Yeah. So the Nova Open, with it right around the corner, man, it doesn't give a ton of time to really figure out, like, some of those good combos,
Yeah, no, I think the way my initial take after playing, like, 2 games of the new JHB was... I think most people expect most games to be like, I'm going to score every battle tactic and my grand strategy. Right. And I think now we just have to come to the internal realization that, like, that's not necessarily the case anymore. And I think that's cool, but also I think for, like, some really big players, it's kind of a weird dissonance that they're having a hard time reconciling. It's like, hey, you might not score all your battle tactics anymore. It's, like, not as guaranteed anymore. So, like, you could miss battle tactics in the previous GHB, but like this GHB, it's like it feels like it's gonna happen way more often than not.
100% agreed there. Yeah, I mean, I was looking at them the other day and I was like, man, these look really hard, like really, really hard to do. Like you almost have to choose which one you're gonna pursue at the expense of some other ones.
Yeah.
So, very, very interesting. We'll see how it shakes out. I always, with all of these leaks and stuff that happen, I always like to say, okay, well, I don't know the full story. I need to take a wait and see approach.
Yep.
Because there's always something else that comes out that like wasn't part of the original leak that you're like, okay, it's not as bad as it seems, everybody. Like it always happens that way too.
Yeah, I mean most reaction war gamers have is always like first like denial, and then like anger, and then like eventually it's like compromise and acceptance. Like you go through all the phases.
Exactly. I would be remiss, and I know this is not really super on topic from what we talked, but I would be remiss to talk about the fact that in 2020 at the Las Vegas Open, which was the last major that or last grand tournament that I played in, because I got the Nova Open is the next one that I'll be doing in. But in the Las Vegas Open 2020, I got Best Night Haunt there. And the only reason that happened was because I believe you were playing the OCR Bone Reapers.
Yes.
And not Night Haunt.
I think...
Weren't you a Night Haunt player before?
No, you think of Alex Gonzalez. He was playing...
I thought you were the Night Haunt player.
No, I was a Fire Slayer player. That's the year I won ITC. It was Fire Slayers. I lost the LVO finals. I was playing the finals against the souped up pre-nerfed Hedonites, the White Dwarf updates.
Yes, the double keeper list, right?
Yeah. The pre-nerfed one. I was playing that in the finals. It came down to actually it was a really close game. But that was my year. I ended up winning ITC that year with Fire Slayers. It was obscene. Like I had not to brag about myself, but like it was
Go for it.
On a GT basis. If it was a 2-day 5-round GT, that Fire Slayer army I took had a 95% winning rate. which means I only
oh my gosh.
I only lost 2 games the entire time I played him in GTs, and that was it was LVO and then one other GT. So it was like I played like something like 130 games in total or something with that army, and it had like a 95% winning rate. It was really not to say like it's me necessarily, but like I think people were not like the old days of back then it was like 1.0 GHB. Like old Veysseires were just, or the new, the second edition of Veysseire were very, very, very good army where you didn't have to do like things like battle tactics and grand strategy and just sit on objectives.
Right.
It was like, very good.
Yeah, and you could have like 30 of them if I'm not mistaken, and like, with the banner and all that stuff, like they were just impossible to move.
Oh yeah, they were very unkillable. They could completely body block people off objectives, and they hit really hard too. It was an obscene army for like in terms of when you think about like how it's designed and how the missions played. So I had a lot of fun. I don't know if my opponents at all. Even so, my teammate and co-captain for the Corsairs, Alex, had so much PTSD from playing against that fire slow list, because we would usually, like, if we played in like the Northwest, we'd end up playing at some point or another in the tournament, and he was he just evolved like some like some PTSD from seeing those angry dwarves across the table. He probably still has nightmares from them now. So
he's like, all I see is half naked dwarf men in my dreams.
How do I kill these assholes?
That's great. Yeah. Oh, so I apologize for getting you confused with Alex.
Oh, it's all good. He's better looking and more handsome, so it makes sense.
Oh,
I'll take that. I'll take that.
Fair enough. Now, you're based out of Seattle.
Nope.
Right? No.
Close.
Is he based out of Seattle?
No. I'm based. We're both. Me and Alex live in Portland, Oregon, so it's like close to Seattle.
Oh, Portland.
Yeah,
okay.
I
got you.
Pacific Northwest. I do play a lot of events in Seattle, since the other team that plays out there runs a lot of events, which is really nice. But yeah.
Are those the 2+ tough guys?
It's Victoria's Secret, and then 2+ tough is or we're rolling ones. That show / podcast is out of there too. So yeah. Yeah, I remember running into them at LVO and the Nova Open before, and really liking them. They were really good guys. So, what's the gaming scene in Portland like? We have like a ton. Like, so if you don't know anything about the Pacific Northwest, and when people ask me this, it's the home of Wizard of the Coast. So there's a crap ton of like tabletop gamers and point board game gamers. It's also where War Machine comes from, Privateer Press comes from. They're from Seattle.
Oh, that's right.
So like there is like a ton of people who play. Now, if you ask me what's the competitive scene like, it's a bit like murkier, because we got a lot of players who play, like, for example, like there's 6 major game stores in Portland. It's not a huge city, but there's 6 major game stores. And all of them usually get like 30 to 40 players each week on their league, or when they do their Warhammer night. So like it's a pretty large amount of players. But when you're talking about competitive, it's a bit like you get a lot of people are kind of like, they play it as more like their hobby, and like we typically describe as garage hammer, and not necessarily like competitive Warhammer, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But it people when usually ask me that question is for a competitive reason. I'm like, well, we don't actually get we get maybe like a solid like 45 players consistently showing up to events. But usually the same guys almost always. But in terms of like, if you're interested in just coming to an area and see if there's a lot of wargaming happening, the Pacific Northwest is a ton of people who play all types of tabletop games. So
yeah, very cool. Yeah. So our podcast, I mean, this is the Talking Warhammer segment of our podcast. We have several segments dedicated to just like role-playing games and board games and things like that. And then we also do a Warcry segment as well that's dedicated to Warcry. But That's very cool. Like Wizards of the Coast is there. I bet there's a lot of Magic tournaments there too.
Yeah.
I bet there's a ton.
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, that's their those stores I talked about. They get 48 players a week. Like their Friday Night Magic is like almost 100. Like these are big stores. Like if you want, if you ever guys want to look them up, like I think like there's kind of a franchise, also super nice store called Mox Boarding House, which is obviously a Magic reference. But like they have a super nice like cafe bar with a huge gaming space, and then I mean their company is Card Kingdom, who owns Mox Boarding House, which is a huge MTG reseller, right? Effectively, so yeah, for the most part, and then they super awesome secret down low fact: they're their own distributor, so their store sells Games Workshop products for 15% off. Permanently.
What?
So, and then I live in Portland, which is no sales tax. So, like that, I do all my shopping at Mox basically because it's like a permanent, like discounted product. So, and they have a huge inventory, so I would never have to worry about it.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get people like, hey, you know what if you ever want to move for wargaming reasons, you should consider Portland.
You're like, it's a cheaper expense in my life with how much I spend on little plastic dollies.
Exactly.
So it's a quality of life thing. So that's awesome. Well, let's talk about the Atlantic City Open that you just got done with. I think it was 2 weekends ago.
That sounds right. That feels right.
Yeah, 2 weekends ago. You took second place there. You were playing Soulblight Gravelords. Do you want to kind of give us a little overview of your list that you took there?
Yeah. We jokingly talked about like the Vampire Zombie Lord Dragon earlier, I was like, I actually don't have any because I think they're like super bad. But this list itself is it's Legion of Blood, which is not traditionally what you see in the Soulblight army, which is usually between Burgos or Legion of Night. It's designed around one thing and one thing only, and that's to super punish aggressive melee armies. Because the combo it plays around is Neferata, Manfred, and then a Vampire Lord on foot for the +2 to cast Legion of Blood mechanic. And then I have a block of 10 Blood Knights. So if you see Blood Knights and Neferata, the first thing you're going to think of, oh, great, they're going to have unrendable 3-up save.
Right.
And it's this big block of Blood Knights, which are a little bit unwieldy to use in terms of swinging, but they're like a super amazingly effective screen. So what it does is, I'll go over the rest of the army, but for the most part, the playstyle is, when aggressive armies try to hit your army, they usually bounce off, and then like you have your 2 Mortarks behind who can kind of like basically pick off the things they want to pick off, or like fly over and score points, and then the army's backed by 20 Grave Guards that use come from the grave to go hit them in the rear or on the flanks or whatever. And finally, the coup de grace is the army is designed around bravery mechanics as well. So Legion of Blood is this mechanic which if you're in combat of a vampire, that's Legion of Blood. So the Blood Knights or Neferata or the Vampire Lord on foot. When you fail Battle Shock, you lose an extra D3 models. And then on top of that, I run a Horror Gas in the list. And then the Horror Gas prevents Inspiring Presence for units Holy Event 12, enemy units Holy Event 12. And it does the same mechanic as Legion of Blood. And so in some games, I did...
So 2D3?
Yeah, 2D3. I think against Marcella in the last round, I think the Horror Gas screeched off, effective between the combination of Legion of Blood and the Horror Gas, it screeched off 6 or 7 melee snakes throughout the game, which made the difference between a unit sticking around one model to just or a few models to just being dead from Battle Shock, basically. Now that I've kind of explained the mechanics, I'll go over the full list. So it's Manfred, Neferata, Vampire Lord on foot as the general with Arcane Tome, Master of Magic. So it's basically reroll cast, 2 cast level. First cast it does is +2 to cast. And then for troops, I have 2 units of Skeleton, 2 units of Black Knights for Battle Line because they're in Legion of Blood, they're Battle Line. And I also have 20 Grave Guards, the Horrorghast as my endless spell, and I believe that's it for my army. There is no, I can't remember anything off the cuff after that. But for the most part, 10 Blood Knights. I forgot the 10 Blood Knights.
Yeah.
And then there you go. That's the list effectively. And
interesting.
You use the Black Knights as super effective. Like if you don't have a buffed up Blood Knights of unrenderable saves, you can use the Black Knights to screen for them. They're also super nice at like snagging objectives or harassing like kind of backfield scoring units. Or when they die, they come back with 3 models from the gravesite mechanic. So they're just like a persistently annoying unit because they do, anytime they charge, they do potentially D3 mortal wounds. They have decent profile. Like they're not the worst thing. They're not great either, but they're just super effective for 100 points. And they're 5-man units are like a very big screening, very mobile screen you can use to block movement or block charges, or they're just super highly functional. And then I guess for spells, I ran Decrepify on Neferata, which is debuffs a hero by reducing its damage by 1 and its ability to wound by 1. And then Manfred had Fading Figure, which reduces the attack profile of a unit by 1. Which came into huge play because I think I got both of them off on Morathi, the Shadow Queen, with the double casts, because if you play Soulblight, if you roll a natural 9, unmodified 9 or higher, they double affects the spell, and then some spells can be stacked on units, so like -2 attack, -2 to wound, -2 damage on Morathi for like almost 2 whole turns, and that was like, you just completely crippled their output effectively.
Yeah, for sure.
So for the most part, like that's how the list plays. It's just super. It's kind of control. It's not super aggressive. It plays to the, like I said, punishes aggressive melee army. And at ACO, I played almost nothing but aggressive melee armies. Do you want?
I was gonna say, like the meta right now wants you to be kind of aggressive, especially like with the monsters and things like that. Like you kind of need to get up in people's faces, right? So like if you think about obviously the Auric War Clans, right? Yep. Even the Idoneth Deepkin, you want to get aggressive there too. So there's plenty of Alpha Strike aggressive armies that are good in the meta right now that I could see crash up against the rocks of your Blood Knights right there. The idea of using Blood Knights as a screen, I think, is kind of interesting, because I always think about them like, don't let them charge you, because they can do some good stuff when they charge, obviously, but letting you charge them, I think, is kind of hilarious for them to soak it all up and then just give it back.
Yeah, I mean, it's it's a 30 wound block that has a 3-up save, so, and they're pretty dense in terms of board space. So like and honestly, like I've played so many test games against Alex or myself where the Blood Knights are just not a very good like hammer unit. They don't very hit specifically super hard, but they can tank so well that like with the unrendable, they're just amazing. So
that's awesome. Yeah, I guess they've only got 3 attacks, threes and threes, -1/1 damage. Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah, on the charge, it's +1 damage. I mean, they can like, the one big thing is you can't lock them in combat ever, because when they don't actually retreat, they can just basically make a normal move while in combat, which is a significant distinction because it means that things that prevent retreat don't work against them. Like there's a bunch of like new mechanics that just came out recently, like from Doc, Nighthaunt, Sylvaneth, that prevents retreat, and that rule, I believe, as I read it, like circumvents that because they never count as retreating; they always count as making a normal move, which is it's going to be significant going forward. But like, it's also like, hey, it's a block that you can't lock, so it's massively advantageous in a lot of situations.
Very good. So tell me about your matches.
Yeah, so
that you had.
So the first player I played was a Legion of First Prince. So it was a control army versus kind of a pseudo control army. So
right.
The game did not go very well for my opponent. He's just like, the big thing about Legion of Blood, they just don't have a lot of bodies and then they depend on their heroes to like punch their way out of things. but like, you know, fully debuff greater, because he used the D-Thirster, and, you know, Manfred and Neferata managed to completely like reduce like his ability, like basically debuffed him, and he didn't do anything. And then the rest of the army kind of cherry picked all of his like small things. And then he made this interesting charge where he charged Be'lakor into Neferata, and I was very curious because I was like, because I asked him like, you know what she does? He's like, yeah. And then at the end of the game, I managed to like at the end of the turn, I managed to wound Be'lakor with Neferata's dagger. And if you don't know, the mechanic of her is like, you roll any hero that gets wounded by that dagger at the end of the combat phase, you roll dice. On a 5+, the hero dies, or it's just slain. And that's what happened to Bella.
Oh my gosh!
And I was just
no way.
I was like, "Why are you like?" At first, I rolled that dice, and it came up a 5 up in front of him, and he's like, "Okay, Bellacor's dead." He's like, "Haha, funny." I'm like, "No, that's a thing." He's like, "No, you're kidding." I'm like, "No, look it up." Like, so he didn't believe me. Even after he charged, I asked him, "You know what Neferata does, right?" Like, I was like, and he's like, "Yeah, it's fine." It's like,
He's like, yeah, I totally know. Now I know.
And then for my round 2 opponent, I believe I played Ironjaws, if I remember correctly. Let's see.
Okay.
I played, Ironjaws with a Rogue Idol and a Mega Boss. So a little bit different than like traditional Bloodtooth because it has a Rogue Idol. But once again, like, it's an aggressive melee army to an army that is super aggressive melee. So that game just went up, especially Ironjaws, which have low bravery. Like, it's just like,
that poor guy is like, what just happened to my army?
Yeah, he the bottom of turn 1, I think he had no pigs left, or like 1 unit left. And like literally the 6-man pig unit disappeared because they failed the battle shock test. I think he had 3 of them left, and they failed battle shock, and they were both in range of the Horgas, a vampire. So it didn't matter whatever. Even if you just rolled 1 running, the other 2 would run automatically. Yeah. So it was super brutal.
That is brutal. That's so brutal because he's like, oh boy, here we go, like licking his chops, right? And next thing you know, they run away. That's not cool, dude.
Yeah, well, you know what? I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
You know, I've always been a big fan of bravery mechanics. So anytime I could like make bravery like gimmicks work, I'm always happy. Just something about like, because for so long people ignore bravery and battle shock because so many armies just straight up ignore it, and so they're always surprised when like that mechanic like sneaks its way in and just like wrecks them. They're like, why is this a thing? I totally forgot battle shock is a mechanic I should care about. So.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I think with some of the like with Night Haunt, for example, not being able to if you're terrified you can't do an inspiring presence thing. Like, I think we're going to start seeing more bravery mechanics, and I'm a big fan of that too.
So there's way more than that now, because you got Nurgle with overwhelming stench, right? Their command trait that prevents command abilities, period. So like that includes inspiring presence. And then the DOK got a new battle command trait that prevents inspiring presence as well, or no, it's an artifact, I believe. It's an relic or whatever that prevents that. Mm-hmm. See, sometimes I can't turn my brain off between Age of Sigmar and 40k. I use like the lingo between the two of them. Yeah. And then yes, there is the Orgas, obviously, and then there's Night Haunt, and so like there, and I believe Sylvanev got something that does something with bravery. I forgot if it prevents inspiring presence or not. Like, there's just like battle shock is a thing that matters, especially since I think they removed it pretty much all immunity to battle shock mechanics. Like, I think OBR is the only army left with immunity to battle shock.
Right.
Doc used to have it from the Hack Queens, and that's gone. So battle shock is creeping its way back into being a mechanic that matters. And Fire Slayers used to have it as well, and that's gone as well now. So all these kind of battle shock trickery are coming back effective.
Well, and I was gonna say that that I think the key is that they rolled a lot of these out just before this new season of war came, when we do have hordes that, some of them don't have great bravery. And I mean, obviously, like, if you lose some piggies compared to like 5 battle line chaff troops. Like, who cares? But now that the armies are a little bit smaller because of the points increases and things like that from when we moved into 3.0, the battle shock can play a major role in whether and how well you do in that game.
Yeah, especially as to echo your sentiments, with the new GHB pushing towards like big blocks of battle line units, like battle shock is gonna be a huge way to make sure that those units can't rally next round, right? By basically making them disappear off the battle shock roll. Like that's the big that's gonna be the big important thing, because there is nothing more frustrating than you let's say killing 6 out of 10 snakes. They inspire presence, but they removed all the models, so they're out of combat. And then the next turn they spend a command point for a rally to start the hero phase, and they bring back 5 because they're on a 4-up instead of a 6-up, and you're like, oh
yeah, no kidding.
Like, what the hell is this bullshit? So...
yeah, but yeah, I mean now with a lot of these anti-battle shock things, and it's so funny because we had a long discussion with I don't know if you know Lincoln Tidwell at all. He's a player out here, but anyway, I had a long discussion with him about the advantages of having rally at the beginning of the hero phase versus the end of the battle shock phase or whatever, so that makes a big difference there.
It's gonna be, I mean, I now see a lot more value to the Battlesmith for Fire Slayers with the new change, for the new GHB. But before then, I was kind of like, this guy kind of does nothing for this army. But now it makes a lot more sense. I'm just and then I was gonna mention that the big thing about rally is that now there's literally a mission in the new GHB that everybody gets improved rally. So
interesting.
So we'll have people are gonna. I think most rally is one of those mechanics. A lot of newish players or not very experienced players never use to their full advantage. And I think
I agree.
This is gonna be a mechanic. I think more people are gonna get acquainted with, I guess.
Yeah, and again, because we're moving into the battle line stuff, you're going to have a block of 40, so you lose 20. Rally all of a sudden makes sense, right? Because you're rolling a dice for 20, and on a 6-up, I mean, you're getting hopefully 3 or 4, maybe 5 back. Whereas when I was running my brutes in with my orcs, I'd lose 2. A rally doesn't make sense there, unless I desperately need it. So, I think we'll see it a lot more. But that's if the troops don't get wiped off the board from the battle shock in the beginning, right?
Exactly.
So. Very good, very good. All right, so you played
I played Tom.
Legion of the First Prince list, and then Iron Jaws. And who was your third matchup?
Oh, I played well-known celebrity of Age of Sigmar, WARHAMMER Weekly Tom.
Oh, did you now? Okay.
Yeah, I played him in his Nighthawk.
What was he playing? Was he playing Nighthawk?
Yeah, he was playing his Nighthawk at the event.
Okay.
It was a very so this was my first game against New Nighthawk because I was literally in Europe for a month before ACO, so I haven't been able to get any real games against it. So it was both a learning experience and also kind of I made a couple of mistakes that could have cost me the game, but Tom also made a couple of mistakes that really cost him the game, and then I had I had really bad luck. I had 10 Grave Guards charge 20 of his Chain Rasp, and he lost 18 out of the 10.
How?
He even spent a command point for the 5-up shrug.
No.
And I think I did 10 wounds and had 3 mortal wounds from the Grave Guards, which was slightly above average. And then he failed a bunch of a lot of 5-ups, and then failed another round of a lot of 5-ups, and they just disappeared. And it allowed me to start the clock on all 3 objectives. And then it's that mission where you score points based on what turn count it is, and the objectives don't come in until turn 2. And it was just literally that basically allowed me to have all 3 objectives for starting on turn 3, starting on bottom of turn 3, and it's just like it really put him so far behind in points. It was going to be hard to come back, especially since there was nothing in his army that could really go fight the Graveguards, because they were basically too busy fighting the rest of the Blood Knights and the Mortarks. So it was it was in that way that one dice roll basically made it a very one-sided game. But for the most part, like, it was pretty close. I mean, he stopped me from scoring 2 battle tactics, so that was very good. Like, those damn redeploys, kept rolling sixes on redeploys, really cost me those battle tactics.
You're like, stay here,
please. Don't make this 3-inch charge become a 9-inch charge. Reroll and still fail. Damn it. So anyway, no, it was an unfortunate end of that game, because like it was like neck and neck until like that literally happened, and then it just like it just swung 100% the opposite way. So
at the end of the day, we play a dice game, right? And that's just sometimes how they roll. You know, it was funny because I cut my teeth playing with some pretty good players out here. It was Garrett Mulroney that actually brought me into playing Age of Sigmar.
Another Corsair.
Yes, exactly. Of course. We, you know, I'd play and I'd be like, oh man, like, and I kind of complain about my dice, and he's just like, look, like, you can complain about the dice all you want, but good players learn how to win despite the dice, you know? And, you know, I took that to heart, because it's true, you know, like, you know how to, like, sort of mitigate for bad rolls and make sure you don't put yourself in positions where you are going to, you know, lose if you don't make that really good roll or whatever. So, you know, you learn tactics to keep yourself out of trouble, and to really, you know, put the vice on when other players are when you need to make that win. But at the end of the day, it's still a dice game, you know. So it can come back at the worst times and get you with a dice roll.
Oh yeah,
for sure.
I mean, it's also the best part of the game, because it gives you stories to regale your friends who share the hobby with you. Like there's nothing more like quintessential than like the post, you know, the lunch break where everybody's just like, so this happened in my game, and then the next guy's like, well, hold my beer, let me show you, like, let me tell you about what happened in my game. So for sure. You're like, I needed a 9 on the charge, and I rolled an 8 and an 8, and I lost the game. You know what I mean? And you know, I've had plenty of those when I played Night Haunt before, where it's like I could have won the game if I just would have made the charge. You know, so plenty of good stuff. So that sounded like an interesting one. So that was your third game. Yeah. With Night Haunt. What were your 2 last ones? I played a Wicked Dicey player from Boston. He played Iron Jaws, and it was his list instead of Bloodtooth was Iron Suns. But it's, you know, the same problem. Like it's just an aggressive melee army fighting an army that is completely designed to just shut that down. And in fact, like, what ended up happening in that game is that I failed to cast the unrendable save for the first 2 turns, and actually he took that as like kind of like his chance to pounce. But the problem is like between the screens of the Black Knights and so forth, he wasn't really able to maximize his hits into the Blood Knights. And then at the end of the day, the Blood Knights are still a 3-up save. But they had Mystic Shield, so they were 2-up, and then like all at defense, because they're Hunters at the Heartland, so you can't roar them. So 1-up, and they just didn't really punch through the Blood Knights, even about unrendable. And then the rest of the army kind of just like, he had a block of 15 brutes, like literally killed like 1 Blood Knight, I think. And he just rolled bad, and it just, that is a sad day. It just wasn't enough damage, and then the entire block like disappeared from the horror gas plus the. It's just super brutal. He did prevent a battle tactic of mine by basically using the Iron Suns mechanic. Like, I was literally like not a little bit more than 9 inches away from a unit of he made like an 11-inch charge with some boars that allowed him to stop me from scoring my Conquer battle tactic. So that was kind of like, you know, in that sense, like, that was pretty amazingly good too. But it is like, you'll see a theme, like, so like I ended up winning, but I lost some battle tactics, which comes into huge play because the battle tactics were how tiebreakers were basically for bracketing was decided.
Yep.
So it meant like I had I was an undefeated player, but I was in the lower end of the undefeated bracket effectively.
Right.
And then my last game, was round 5, was against oh my god, it's Marcella, who played her Daughters of Cain army, and then once again, super aggressive melee army playing against an army that super punishes that. And in that matchup, like I could do no wrong. Like there was like all the spells were going off, like the Blood Knights were unrendable the entire time. Marcella had literally asked me, how do I beat your army? And I was just like, well, don't get super aggressive. Play, like, try to wait until turn 3 or 4 to start, like, engaging. Try to score the points. And, like, because you're just going to find yourself, you're not going to win the war of attrition if you engage, like, super fast. And she's like, okay.
Right.
And first thing she does is charge me with Morathi turn 1. And I'm like, well, I guess there we go. Like, she saw an opportunity to try to, like, snipe Manfred by charging outside of his 3 and then piling it into it, but I redeployed in a way that made it impossible for her to do that, but she still charged anyway. So then Manfred bolted, and she saw another opportunity with like all of her multi-activation mechanic to try to pile in enough times to get to swing into Neferata, which she did, but at that point she ended up like, so it forced her to double turn because she had bottom of the turn. She took top of second, did that whole trick, but then Neferata ended up surviving with like 3 wounds left. And so she did kill her. And then when I was bottom of the turn, like at that point, like Morathi had taken like 6 wounds because she was basically using the Blood Knights as a surfing board to get into to pile in towards Neferata.
Oh, I got you. Yeah.
And then she basically like took like half damage, so she was dead by the bottom of turn 3. Like she died on the bottom of turn 3. So that was like losing like, and then like her snakes were like trying to charge the end bits of the Blood Knights, and they were just like losing 3 or 4 models from the Blood Knights swinging back and not really doing anything to the Blood Knights, and then the bravery modifiers from the Death Rattle plus the Horgas meant like, and the Legion of Blood mechanic meant she kept feeling battle shock and like losing a bunch of snakes that way. So she did what I told her not to do, and then lost pretty badly. I think it was like she was basically tabled by this bottom of turn 3.
Oh,
and she
totally overextended.
Exactly. I mean, the mission kind of forced her to extend because it's the one of its 2 far away objectives in the center and then 1 home objectives down the center. And she played like, I didn't think she played badly, but like I just thought if she just waited like maybe another turn, I think the game would have gone a very different way instead of just like throwing in like on turn 1, and that was the end of that game effectively. Once again, like super premium matchup for my army, like super aggressive melee army.
I'm surprised that her Crystal Gaze touch didn't do much more against your Blood Knights.
She kept using it
because that's a really powerful mechanic.
She kept killing 1 knight with Morathi, and I kept pulling the 1 knight that was in base to base of them.
Interesting.
So every time she activated Morathi first and killed the Blood Knight, or activated the sisters and killed the Blood Knight, I would just pull the one that was in base. And the
very smart.
And then after the first time she lost some models from Battle Shock, she kept removing models away from the Blood Knights because I don't want to take more Battle Shock from them. Then when they retreated and recharged her entire army, like they just killed the snakes. Like that's the one thing that Blood Knights have like pretty good chance at killing is things with like low save value and like are not super high wound costed. Like they're actually pretty good against that. But it's like, because we've been playing in a meta that's been like super highly durable like monsters, so Blood Knights don't tend to do very well against. But against infantry units, they tend to be pretty effective at killing. So it was that kind of like that thing. It's like they're just better at killing the snakes than the snakes were at killing them effectively.
I gotcha. Okay, that makes more sense. Yeah, I my friend was running a protector list the other day, and man, the save on that guy, he had them down to effectively a 1+, right? And so the snakes got into him, and he ended up like not taking any damage from their attacks, but then they just did the crystal touch and lost the entire unit.
Yeah.
And he's like, wow, Okay.
Yeah, it's the Crystal Touch can be super brutal, but it has, like I said, like it is. If I remember correctly, the way Marcella described it to me, the mechanic happens after they swing. So after you remove casualty, and it's a 1-inch reach. So if you just pull yourself out of 1 inch, they can't do it. If I understand correctly.
That's very interesting.
And you know what? Before I make myself sound stupid,
I think you're right. And the thing is they do it right after they swing, and if you they have to be with 1 inch, and but as long as one is within 1 inch, the whole unit gets to do their roll, right?
Yeah. So after I saw it the first time, and all of its attack have been resolved, you can pick one enemy unit. So after you remove casualties, that's when attacks are resolved. So if you just pull yourself out of 1 inch, they can't.
That's a very interesting point, because I didn't even think about that. Because when you resolve the attacks, you have to remove the casualties right away, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
So
wow.
And
that actually, wow. Okay, good to know.
Yeah. The most of the time I was using them. Once again, this is where Black Knights come in super useful. Using them on the flanks to basically like restrict like the funneling the charges, so she couldn't really maximize like ability to swing into the Blood Knights anyway. And then she ended up mostly just killing the Black Knights anyway, because they were the ones scoring the points more than focusing on the Blood Knights. Yeah. So in the grand spectrum of things, like it's just like she started the clock too early, and if she just waited like I think one more turn, the game would have been a lot closer than it was.
Right.
But one of the things that amazed me about the Doc book, and this is going to echo for the new GHB, is holy God, their battle tactics are super easy to score. Holy shit!
Oh yeah!
Oh my God! I was like,
yeah.
And they have bonus. They get bonus points, and I was like, I don't think any battle tactics from any other battle tome gets bonus points. Like potentials. Like I was like blown away. Like I was like, holy shit!
Yeah, that surprised me too. When I saw that, I'm like, okay, well, I guess they're just going to be using their battle tactics there.
I mean, they require some list construction, but like for the most part, like they're not super punitive in list design, and they're super. The fact that they give bonus points, I was just shocked, because I didn't see a single battle tome, battle tactic before they gave bonus points. So that was the first one. I was like, or if I can't recall of any other one that gives bonus points, basically, especially on high.
Yeah, I literally just grabbed my Night Hunt book that was next to me to see if they get any bonus ones.
I know the Sylvanefs don't, and I don't think the Skaven ones do either. So I think it's this is the first tome that gets bonus points in its battle tactic. Sounds like somebody at Games Workshop HQ really likes DOK. Yeah.
I mean, some of these are like, some of the Night Hunt ones aren't terrible. Like there's like the Black Coach can get a battle tactic if it ends its turn within.
Yeah. They're
3 inches of an objective, but you got to take the Black Coach there. You know what I mean?
There's some like that, and that Black Coach is a little bit more restrictive because it's a 330-point model versus like the one that's like Shoot and Fade or whatever for Doc, which is basically 2 90-point units, and that you want to take anyway most of the time. So like,
right.
Like, okay. No, it's just it. And also their grand strategy was amazing. Like I was like, my grand strategy is every unit in my army is either at least swing once or die. And I'm like, how's that like?
What?
How's that hard? I don't understand. That's a give me.
Especially with Doc, right? Like Doc is either gonna swing or die. Like
I'm racking my brain over here for like 3 points of the new GHB, and I'm like, oh my God, like which grand strategy you take? They're all so hard. And Doc here is just like, I just have to execute my simplest plan. Run at you.
Run at you and fight. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I guess that prevents them from hiding the Witch Elf in like the block of 40, or the Witch Hag in the
you can't play that
in the middle of the unit.
You can't play that list with that grand strategy with expecting your army to like use like deck chair units, basically. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. But still, though, I mean, like that's just ridiculous. So, yeah. Interesting.
Is it the era of Doc again? I don't know. We'll see. Find out at 10.
We'll see. Yeah, exactly. It's funny because when the Dragon list came out for Stormcast, right, and everyone's like, "Oh my gosh, this is unbeatable." It took the meta about a month to figure it out.
Well, it's Let's keep in mind, they also nerfed them by adjusting points like by 100 or something.
They're like, just kidding, guys. Just kidding.
And then they also nerfed them too, so that they didn't get -1 to be wounded, like that commentary. Like there was some substantial nerfs before that.
That's true. Could you? I mean, and I feel bad for any of our listeners that went out and bought a whole bunch of dragons, being like, "These guys are going to be amazing," and then GW is like, "Just kidding," because that kind of sucks.
They're still really good. They're just not.
They are.
Not. Now that the GHB is not around monsters as much, like you don't necessarily see all dragon armies, but they're still really good as bounty hunters. So like, they're phenomenal.
That's a very good point. And they're not as big of a liability either because they were monsters, right? So
they're still.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
They're not. I forgot. Are they priority points? Yeah, I think so. Right, they're priority targets. I don't know. That's gonna go. Who knows? By the way, we're recording this before the balance patch, which is coming out in 3 days for us. So, like, I don't know. We'll see what happens in 3 days.
Right now, it's just pure speculation, right? That we could do. So, yeah, for sure. Well, congratulations on your second place finish at ACO. It sounds like the difference between second and first was some of those battle tactics that you missed out on.
Yeah.
And which again kind of swings around, comes full circle to what we talked about in the beginning of this with the new GHB coming out, which is a lot of those battle tactics are going to be very hard to get, and that could be a big difference on, I mean, you could finish like difference between like a top 10 finish and like 30th place, because you may not get hardly any of your battle tactics as you go, so
before I jump on that comment on that, I do want to say that the person who did win the event at ACO was Emma, who was a Team America player, playing against Bill Souza in the finals. So
wow,
almost identical armies. It was both drowned men with like Puzzboil Blight Lords. And originally ACO was supposed to have 6 rounds, but they didn't have it. They put it up to a vote because we didn't hit the 90-player cap for 6 rounds. And I was just like, "Oh, Emma, you dodged me. We didn't get that 6th round. You didn't get to play me." I think she would have.
That's awesome.
I think she would have won anyway, but it would have been funny.
Yeah. That's great. That's great. Well, let's move into Team America, because I mean, there you go, right? Top like players there in the last round were all Team America folks. So I know you told me earlier about your captaincy, but I'm still calling you Captain America until I hear official news, unless you're gonna give me some official news today.
I don't think it's it's not a well-kept secret by any chance. I don't think we were. So for the most part, like, so in two World Tournament ago, Bill Souza was the captain, and he also kind of helped create the event. Because originally it was ETC, and then ETC fell apart, and then Bill basically identified there was still a market for this event, so they started, him and the Europeans for different captains from different teams started AOS Worlds, which is the World Championship, and he was captain for the Milan one. And then he wanted to take a break and asked me to basically take over the ship in a sense. And I was like, "Hell no, I don't want it." And he's just like, "Well, there's no one else." So I'm like, "Okay, I guess I have to." In a sense, no. I mean, like, I was glad to be asked, but it was kind of like, holy shit, I don't really know. Like, this was like, that year was my first World Championship. So like, I still rookie-eyed and so forth. And then so I was captain last year for Prague, and then Bill resumed captainship for the next one in 2023. And I basically told him, because he was really reluctant about being captain. It's a lot of work, so I said, "You know what? I'll take care of all the logistics. You just focus on like making sure the team wins." And that's like, so basically what I'm doing is I'm taking over all the logistic aspect of the captainship. And
nice.
I'm going to take care of like actually bringing us home the trophy. So that's the only thing that matters.
Right. At the end of the day, that's what you're going to be judged by, right? Is how well did you do at Worlds, not which beds did you guys get to sleep in, over the course of the event. So I hear you on that. So if you don't mind, give us a very rough primer for those that aren't like super familiar with what the World Championship is. I know you referred to ETC, which was like the European Tournament Championship or something like that, right? Yeah. Okay, yeah, and but then it became the World Championship, as you mentioned. Bill was instrumental in kind of getting with the other captains across the globe, really, and I guess really Europe, and getting some teams together to do it. But give us a rough layout of like how does it work, like who's involved? Because I mean, there's like 22 teams, I think, right, which is pretty good turnout.
22 teams of 8 players. So basically, the teams are broken around 10 roles, 8 players, 1 assistant, 1 coach, and then you can, any of those players can be the captain as well. The captain is only responsible for inside the event is responsible for pairings. So since this is a team event, there's a process. We do a pairing process every round between each team, and both captains basically go forth and basically assign what we call defender attackers. So what ends up happening is we know which mission we're playing in each round. Like that's public information. What we don't know is what the other team is going to be playing for that round. And the process goes: we roll dice. Whoever wins the coin toss effectively gets to basically put their defender first. So basically, they put one army down, face down. You don't know where they're playing it, and they reveal it, and then the other team gets to put 2 attackers forward. And then the defender or the other team gets to pick one of those 2 to be the player that's playing their defender, and then it rotates the other way, basically. Now the other advantage of being defender is you get to pick the type of table you're going to play on, because they basically have all preset tables, and they have 2 formulas: dense or light terrain, and the formula is it's based on the mission. So if you're like literally like, okay, I'm playing a very like kind of like chunky defender style army, and I'm going to play against something shooting, I'm going to choose like dense terrain, which has a lot of like line of sight blocking and big terrain pieces and so forth and so forth. So there's that kind of whole strategy that goes around the pairing process, and literally the event is won and lost by pairing strategy. That plays a huge role into how you do. Obviously, what type of player you're bringing, what type of armies you're bringing, player roles into the pairing strategy, but the core component of the event is the pairing strategy. That's what you get a lot. You get to see a lot of armies that are not in AOS Worlds. If you ever look at which teams are showing up and what they're playing, you're going to see armies you're like, I would never take this here GT.
Interesting.
Yeah, they're not designed for GTs. They're designed for missions and certain pairings. So that's like.
Wow.
That's how the strategy gets formulated.
So let me ask you this: like other team events, for example, there's the ATC that's down in Nashville. I think it's coming up in July. It's a 4-player team tournament, right? And you have to have 1 army from each Grand Alliance there. Were there any kind of restrictions like that you had to do in terms of like for your factions and things like that?
So if you go to the AOS Worlds website, they have like the entire like fact breakdown of how like the construction armies goes, but there's no restriction on like one for each Grand Alliance. But the restriction is you can only have 1 army, 1 faction basically, and no war scroll can be shared across the team. Meaning that like let's say like Be'lakor, it can kind of fit into every army in Chaos, but you only have 1 Be'lakor per team.
Or like 1 Nagash or something like that, right?
Exactly. And they did like something like for example, Legion of First Prince and Zinj could have like horrors, right? So you can't share horrors across the 2 factions effectively, unless they're summoned. No,
wow.
The only thing with summon units could be whatever. They don't have to follow that restriction.
Okay.
But the other thing they did is like you couldn't have the same artifact across the team. So no like multiple arcane tomes. You couldn't have more than 2 of the same grand strategy across the team. So no hold the line everywhere or like Predator's Domain everywhere. So in that case, you had to be a little bit like thoughtful about how you design your list across the team. So.
Oh, you had to be super strategic, I imagine. Because like Arcane Tome is so ubiquitous. Like, it seems like every faction has Arcane Tome just because it's so good, right? Like it was almost like the Amulet of Destiny before that thing got nerfed, right? Yep. But it's very interesting because that will absolutely affect the kind of list that you bring.
Exactly. I mean, we had when we were building our team this year, we had does the Arcane Tome go towards the Stormcast player, or does it go to the Arjaw player? Like they're both could usually benefit from it. So we have to make a decision which player is going to get it.
Oh, that's very interesting. So tell me about who was on Team USA this year.
Sure. For the team this year, I was playing captain, aka a person who was playing, but also the captain. And then Emma Mangles was on it. Marcella Helu was on it. Sean Clark was on it. Originally, Gavin Greigar was on it, but he was unfortunately had to step down, and then Jake Lecuyer stepped up and played for it to rep him. And then we also had Anthony Tranelli, but he unfortunately had to step down as well. So then we had Noah Singh step up and play him. And then we had Bill and Roger Parker, both from Wicked Dicey, Bill Souza, obviously. And then the last player, I think that's did I count 8 or 7? Did I forget somebody else? No, I think that's it. I just didn't count myself like an idiot. And then we also had coach was Tom Guan. I'm sure a lot of people know of Tom Guan right now because he's literally everywhere at all times playing whatever. And then for assistant we had Corey McKinney out of Boston as well. Probably the best assistant we've ever had. I think during the weekend he walked like 30 miles during like the tables and so forth. Like, by the way, the assistant is he can't talk to the players. All he can do is basically like pick up dice, rearrange models. Like, so in case like somebody's like playing an army of like huge vats of dice, like he would basically like rearrange their dice and put them in buckets, preset buckets of like 20, 10, and so forth. So that would speed up because the game is played on a clock. Like we have an hour and a half, an hour and 40 minutes each player. And like so, like one of our players has huge blocks of zombies to help him speed up the game. He can basically like reposition like the models after they're slain, so that way you have access to them quickly if you needed to summon them to the gravesite. The other thing too is he can like he's a water boy, so like players are asking for drinks, coffee, whatever, or like he would be responsible for figuring out lunch for everybody. So like there was a lot of like logistical work that he did, and the amount of walking he did during the event between all the tables, drinks, and so forth. Like I think he walked like 30 miles or something. Like, best fucking assistant we've had. Like he just put in the work. I think he probably got more tired than any of
us. Dude, that's insane. I mean, because you're thinking like, oh, I'm at a gaming convention. You don't think you're gonna be like walking 30 miles. That is wild. And I love the silent assistant aspect of that too, right? You're like, move those zombies, and it's just like a head nod, right? And they just start moving zombies for you,
Yeah.
That's kind of great.
And then the coach responsibility is basically he's the only person that like when the players call timeout, they can go talk to the coach, and then he's just there to basically give them a heads up about what's happening on the table. He's the only one that's allowed to ask questions at the table for the players. And basically when we take timeouts, it's like to ask them like, hey, should I make this move? And then like, because like sometimes we need to squeeze in like extra points, so we might go for a push for a Hail Mary play more than playing conservatively, depending on the situation across the other tables or what the results on the other tables were. And that's the responsibility of the coach, and obviously helping come up with a team strategy. I mean, all the players are, but like the coach is usually the one that's helping come up with the overall strategy.
And it sounds like the coach kind of has the final say if there's a lot of options, right, that are going on, and so that's it. Now, are you guys all playing at the same time, or is there only like 4 playing at once, or something like that?
We're all playing at the same time. So as we go through pairings, after pairings are done, each player starts their game effectively at the table. So there's 8 games going at once, and that's why like the assistant and the coach, walking around, taking, the assistant can report back to the coach as well what he sees or what he thinks is happening.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of information flow going all at once to the coach, and he's like supposed to filter it down to the people at the table, so they can make better decisions. Like I would often like call over Tom, not as to just ask him like how are we doing as a team, like where are we sitting, like do I need to push? Do I need to like not push? And so forth.
Yeah.
And so forth. That for the most part, like the coach is a fairly important job because you have to have a really good foresight into how games are going. Because the last thing you want to tell the players that like, don't worry, don't push, and then like last minute, like push, like
and you're like, oh, dang it,
yeah.
Would have been good to know 2 rounds ago.
Exactly. So it's a very hard job for sure.
So, did you play Soulblight Gravelords out there at Worlds as well?
No, I played Seraphon, which is literally my least favorite army ever. I hate that army for a passion. I was playing.
I was gonna say, so you went from Fire Slayers to Soulblight Gravelords to Seraphon.
Oh yeah.
Like that's like one of these is not like the others.
Yeah, no, it was like the big. We had some roster changes, so we had some like shifts that happened, which ended up like. So the big thing is like our overall strategy this year is we kind of figured out like what type of armies we want to take, and then we started assigning players to those armies.
Okay.
So that's kind of how I ended up with Seraphon, because we were basically kind of like, well, we want a Seraphon player or Seraphon army, but like of all the options we have for players, like I guess you're gonna have to play Seraphon. Like it was kind of like it's not necessarily like there's works in progress. We're trying to come up with better ways of doing this because we don't necessarily think this is a good way to do it, but it was just kind of like between the roster changes we had plus that, it wasn't super ideal. Because for the most part, like one of the big things that like let's look at Team France for example. Team France has like their team is actually like 50 players, and when they come up with the army they want to take in their strategy, they just find the best player that plays that army in that team.
I see.
Basically put them on there, and then they just practice every weekend until the event in person. For Team America, it's not as possible. Like we did have a very good deep bench this year in the sense we had like 20 players, but like it's still like unfortunately the best Seraphon player was Basil, and like he just like I don't think it was in the cards for him to come to Europe. It's a very expensive trip.
Yeah.
So like it like cost is a huge factor for people who play for Team America, like because we typically only do one in-person practice and we use a lot of TTS to practice games. But this year we're gonna switch to a two in-player practice. So we're gonna have effectively like 2 trips somewhere we're all gonna meet in the United States to do a weekend of practicing. Because that's basically what all the other teams do, and there's huge value out of it for the most part. But it's a lot harder when you're in the United States.
Yeah, I mean, like, France is the size of Texas, right? The entire country is like one state of ours.
Yeah,
so.
And plus, like, 90% of the population is located around Paris. So, like, it's like...
Yeah, exactly.
So, it's very...
Exactly.
It's very easy for them. And it's the same thing for a lot of other countries, for the most part. It's just if Team America wants to, like, basically be the best it can be, we're going to need to start doing more in-person practice. TTS is a good metric for that.
Yeah, man, you came. I spawned so many questions from what you were just saying right there. The first question that I have is, you talked about, hey, we want to play Seraphon, right? Like we know that's an army that we want to bring. Was that driven based on the missions that you guys had? You knew that was like going to be an effective army in a couple of the missions or something like that.
So every team approaches pairing strategy differently. We had a pairing strategy we really liked for Milan, which is 2 AOS Worlds ago, and we tried to take it, try to repurpose it for this new edition, which had basically battle tactics. And it actually, in hindsight, it kind of bite us in the ass. But we, like after the tournament, because we ended up placing, we were 3rd in Milan, and we were running 4th, 3rd in Prague, but then we ended up, we took 2nd in Milan, and then we were running for 3rd, and we ended up basically bouncing down to 8th after we played Denmark, which were previous year's champions. And for the most part, like our pairing strategy is we would pick 4 defenders. We were basically either constantly going to defend each round, and we built 4 defender armies, and one of them was the Thunder Lizard army, and then we basically then built 4 attackers for the types of mission plus armies they might play into. Because that's the thing, the attacker rules is the more like harder one to tell, because when you're defender, you can basically pick a defender and say like you're always going to be playing these missions each round.
Right.
And that's what we did with Emma, like because she played Nurgle and her like pus spoil list, and we basically put her on the same exact 3 missions, and she ended up like she was the 3rd highest scoring player at the event. Like so, like in some cases that strategy works well. In some cases, it didn't work very well. And so for the most part, like it, we try to like I think that's like after round 2, we threw the playbook out. We started putting Seraphon as attackers and so forth because we were not that the Seraphon was having a hard time defending. It's just that there was another defender that was another attacker that was like having a much harder time attacking. So we had to swap position.
Oh, I see.
And then, but most other teams like let's say England's in time, and they have a great. I think AOS coach did a recording, or Veysseire did a recording of their captain, and he goes over their pairing strategy. The way they approach pairing is very more fluid. They basically look at like their player and their player's list, and they're like, okay, like, do you think like what's your? They do red, yellow, green pairings, which is basically like I can't beat this army, so red, and then like I think I can maybe squeeze like a win, so yellow, and then like I can definitely win against this army. Green, and not like a player, just specifically generalized army. Yeah. And then you do the same thing for missions, and then they go like, "Can you can you win on this mission?" Like, no. Can you like blah blah blah? So then they basically go through that, and then so when they do pairings, they're like, okay, it's this mission against this defender. So like, let's look at like the best potential attackers we have for that.
Oh, interesting. So they get like a big old like heat map matrix.
They do it through
thing that they use.
They do a decision tree basically, and that's how they do their pairings for the most part. And it worked very well for them because they ended up winning the event this year. And they usually have one event. The event, I think they're like the longest. Like they're basically the team to beat at the event. Usually, if you beat them, you're probably going to win the event most of the time.
Gotcha.
And so for it's a good working strategy. We wanted to try. We wanted to do something else. And once again, it comes down to the fact that like we don't have. Obviously, we can adapt and adjust now, and that's what we're going to do. But like one at a time, it's like we don't have the availability of a deep roster as much, and also practice.
Yeah.
Right. It's
right.
So it comes down to that. I know some other European teams have the same problem. Even though they're smaller countries, they don't necessarily get a lot of players applying because every team does their selection process differently. No, there's no consensus or like same system.
Right. So that brings me to the second question that I had. You actually brought it right around perfectly. What is the selection process for Team America?
So Team America does basically we take anybody who wants to join. So like in the sense that like we have what we call the Minutemen and the Minutemen program, which is basically our kind of our bench or farming system, where we take whoever wants to come team, if it be it like play like 2 years or play 3 years, whenever you feel like financially you can do it, and then we just basically like we have a rigorous process of it. We practice, and then we use the Minutemen as a resource to help us hone like our strategy and so forth. And then we also have some really good coaches that help like the Minutemen player, like give feedback and critique to these players to try to get them to play better or so forth. And for the most part, like anybody who wants to join Team America can join Team America in that sense. Now the roster selection is a bit more complicated. The roster selection comes down to 2 things. We have a bunch of trial events that we do where we try to put players outside of their comfort zone, because Worlds is not a GT. It's not LVO. It's not what.
Right.
You're not gonna play.
It's not part of the ITC. It's not.
Yeah, and you're gonna play games where like it is wacky. Like you're not playing a GT list, and you're not necessarily. You're gonna be like on your hinge foot. You're also gonna be playing against players who are not necessarily interested in winning. So they're not interested in like making bad play. They're not interested in like being aggressive, because they don't have to. They wanted to knock you out of the pairing in the strategy, so they're trying to not lose much, right? Like because the whole thing is about point differential. So for them,
they're like slow rolling you kind of thing, right?
So I mean, for context, for example, I played an OBR player in Milan of my Fireslayers who basically sat on his one objective with his entire army for 5 turns. Never even try to get to the other objectives on the side, and he just let me like walk down the field to his entire army, and then just fight him in his own objective for the rest of the game. And eventually on the last turn, I managed to take it away from him. But like literally, that was like his entire strategy. So some players at Worlds are literally they're not competing to win like a singles event. They're competing to win a team event.
Right.
So like it's a very different mentality. So we do a lot of like we try to test American players which are used to playing GTs with some challenges that gives them a little bit of a look-see into like what kind of games they're going to be playing into when they get to the team event, right? And then we take notes from that, and then eventually we start talking about strategy, about like what type of player, like what type of armies we want to bring, and then we try to pick the players that fit that army, that play style the best we can. Obviously, but it is the big problem is once again it's a very expensive travel to Europe for a lot of Americans. Like for context, this was Emma's first time in Europe when she went to Prague. So
I mean, that's not a bad place to go for your first time.
No,
Prague is gorgeous,
obviously, I mean, not where we were staying in Prague, but yes, Prague is gorgeous.
That's hilarious.
But for the most part, like this is why we had 2 players drop out of 8 before the event, like because we financial costs or work or whatever. Like there's always a reason why, and it's also the reason why we don't get a lot of applicants necessarily like the other teams, because we were very candid. Like when you sign up to the team, there's a question and answer. And one of the things that just tells you straight up, like, if you plan on playing this year, are you going to be able to afford like $12,000 like basically travel costs between like the
I was going to ask like what's the average cost to be on Team USA? Is it $12,000 is what you guys kind of estimate?
I think we picked the highest number we kind of estimated, just because that way we give them the full brunt of it, and we want them to feel like if you can afford that, then you're comfortable enough. Because it is like I said, it's a huge financial cost to it. Like between traveling twice in the United States, staying in Airbnbs or hotels, and then going to Europe for almost a week effectively. It is it has a. I mean, Prague was cheap. Like compared to Milan, Prague was a much cheaper venue, but it was it was still like between the flight and everything, at least like $2,000 to $3,000, not counting food and drinks. Because hey, it's Team America, we do a lot of fucking drinking, so for that context, that was and by the way, for anybody who wants to see like what this is about, Prague was totally televised and streamed by 2 streaming services. One was Honest Wargamer, if you want to see the English ones, and then the French also had their own streaming called the French Wargame TV or something, and they both streamed like almost the entire event. And you can actually watch Team America play the home team, which is the Prague team. I think round 3 is when we played Prague.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Sorry, not Prague.
Very good.
Czech Republic.
Czechoslovakia, right?
Czech Republic.
Or Czech Republic. Sorry. That's Czechoslovakia. That's like pre-1990s.
It's like when we went to middle school. That's Czechoslovakia was still
exactly.
around.
Exactly. Oh yeah. So I mean the cost obviously is a significant thing. Do you guys do any like fundraising or anything like that to help offset costs, especially like for someone like you, where you're flying from the West Coast to Prague is almost probably double the cost from someone in New York going to Prague.
Yeah,
right.
And the other thing too for me is like there's before I joined Team America, like one of the things, I used to be a huge competitive 40K player, and I always felt the 40K team, which the equivalent 40K team was always kind of an East Boys like clubhouse, East Coast clubhouse, because it was only ever players from the East Coast. And it was like in hindsight, like I realize now after playing for Team AOS team, it's just because like it's expensive for West Coast players. Like because like if I want to do like an in-person practice, I'm gonna pick spots in the East Coast, or at least pick spots that close enough to the other like where most of the team is. Right, I don't want to make like
try to find a central location somewhere. Right, that's not too far away.
When we played Milan, we picked Denver because we had one player in Denver. I was on the West Coast, and it was a relatively affordable flight for everybody else. great
Yeah.
venue. We were staying at. We were like in a lodge in the mountains. It was phenomenal.
Oh, sweet.
And then this year we picked Pittsburgh because like literally I was the only one not from the Northeast. So Pittsburgh was a great place because Bill and Roger lived there and they had like tables to supply and terrain. So fantastic. Next year we're probably looking at like either like somewhere in Texas and then somewhere in the East Coast again because that's just the reality of most of the team right now. At least the people who have applied to be on the team are living in the East Coast. Like we have some.
Yeah, I mean, population density says like more people are gonna be from the East Coast than elsewhere because that's where a lot of people are, right? So, I think if you were to draw like a median line, it would go through like West Virginia. I think is what I saw.
Yeah,
of population. So
it's not surprising, and those are things I sometimes hear like other West Coast players. Especially on my team, you know who you are, complaining about how like Team America is for East Coast people. I'm like, I'm literally living the West Coast. Like, what more fact do you want? But I get it. It's a financial investment for sure. And in terms to answer your question about fundraising, we started thinking about it last year. The problem we still haven't figured out is we're not. The team is not like incorporated in any way, so we have to go figure that out. For me, because that stuff is we don't want somebody to get sued or something, effectively. And then
100%, yeah, absolutely.
And then it's also hard to decide who gets the fun and who doesn't, right? Like there's also that whole mechanic. Like some people on the team don't necessarily need the help, and then some others probably do need the help, but then some people might feel a little bit like hurt that they weren't even offered or they didn't access. So it's just like it's hard to figure that out. And even the Europeans, especially the captain of the team Denmark, was like, like to help you guys, maybe we should like increase the ticket price for all the teams by like $5, so like that fund can go to you guys, buying tickets. And I appreciate the sentiment, but the problem still like revolves around that issue of like how do you disperse these funds, right? When Dice Baron basically did the Team America dice, and he asked us like what we want to do with like any of the profit, like to go back to the team, and me and Bill talked it out, and I was like, well, the profit should actually go to a charity because we don't know how we would disperse these funds to anybody, so that's why we asked him to donate any profit made from these dice to a charity, and I think he picked a Ukraine charity for the war in Ukraine. So. Yeah, it's a challenge we have to deal with. This is like the logistic aspects, we gotta deal with effectively.
Yeah, and again, I mean, you guys weren't incorporated, so taking money would be like, all right, Bill, are you gonna hold this money or am I? Exactly. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
gets really awkward really fast, right? Yeah. And I mean, the other one thing I was thinking about is that like if you guys ran like a Team USA tournament. Where you charge a certain amount of tickets. Like for example, the Nova Open, the proceeds go to charity, right? If you guys set yourself up as a nonprofit sports, which is a thing, right? Tax liability, it could be considered a charity event as well. To help defray costs and things like that. But you're still with the challenge of like, of course, figuring out who gets it, and that would be a year by year, case by case basis that you guys would have to go through because you're on the West Coast, it's more expensive for you. So that's an easy one to be like, okay, well let's throw them a couple of bucks. But then maybe there's somebody on the East Coast that's like, I would love to come, but I literally can't afford it. And so it's hard to do it, and you guys almost have to. I'm thinking because I used to be the president of a rugby club out here.
Oh, nice. Love rugby.
And let me tell you, I love that sport. I coach my son right now. In fact, I told you the other day I was late from rugby practice. I was coaching his practice.
Oh, nice.
So, anyway, I was the president of a rugby club out here, and let me tell you, like a lot of those same questions were revolved around everything, right? Fortunately, we were like a 501c3. Charity, so that we had our own bank accounts and our 2-person check, so that nobody ended up with money in their pockets that they shouldn't be, and stuff like that. So we had a whole system set up, but then it was like, okay, well, like, this guy really needs to play for us, but he can't pay his dues this year.
Yeah.
Do we just waive that for him, and like, is that fair to the other people? So, again, it was a case by case basis, but I think it's something interesting to explore, because you guys are obviously going to always have these costs.
Oh yeah.
Of going to Europe, because they're not all going to come to the United States. Maybe once in a blue moon, but I doubt it. That's a lot of people coming here.
I know some of the European council members want to try to do an AOS World like event in the United States. Because they think they want to start branching out. Like, they don't want to. They want to have like AOS will be the premier team event, but they all want to start branching out and running like smaller team events. So when you talk like, what about Team America running their own event? Honestly, I think we're gonna have to do that anyway, because I think the AOS World Council wants to branch out and make do more team events across Europe and specifically the United States. And so we're probably gonna see those eventually happen. And for us, right now, I would love to be in a place and time where the entire team is totally subsidized, and nobody has to pay anything to travel, stay at a hotel, and maybe that day will come. Yep. We're gonna work on making it happen. But you're right, the first step, be a faceless company. Don't be don't be Joe, Joe or Bill or Jeremy. So we gotta work on. You're right. We gotta work on that.
Get some structure around it. You gotta elect some officers. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's a whole process for sure. Get a board together of people that want to help out, that may not necessarily play or travel with the team, but that can give advice and advice on how to run an organization, not necessarily play the game, right? So that might... lots of things to do for sure. That's how it always is. But it's very exciting, because I think if you guys were to run some team events, I know that, like I said, I was talking with some friends about going down to the ATC, which is in Tennessee, and that was a big team tournament thing. This year, I guess it's been kind of gutted, because they lost support from Games Workshop and stuff like that, and so a lot of people I know aren't going to it as much, and which is a shame, because it sounded like a really fun event. And it was in Tennessee, so it was kind of hard to get to for a lot of people. Yeah. Who goes to Tennessee, really? And I don't mean that in a bad way, but it's it's off the beaten path.
Is it is it the one in Chattanooga?
I think so. Yeah.
I see.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I think there's a market out there for some interesting team tournaments, because like you said, we do a lot of grand tournaments here. We do a lot of RTTs. We do, all the list building we do is how do I plan for all the meta that's out there right now, that type of thing. And, some of these scenarios that you're talking about are very interesting, because it's being a defender and being okay, well, this is my mission. Right, I'm just a defender. You're going to build your list very differently, knowing that that's how it's going to, and you're going to play differently too. And I think it's very fun. I had a great conversation a couple podcast episodes ago on this Talking Warhammer, where I don't know if you know Scooter Walters. Yeah, Scooter. He's a big Iron Jaws player. Yeah, so Scooter was on the podcast, and he was saying I don't think that we play Age of Sigmar as creatively as we can. We're all so focused on the GTs and the RTTs and the ITC and stuff like that, that we could be playing this in other interesting ways as well, that we just don't tend to, because we're sort of in the same cycle of, the big tournament seasons and stuff like that. So I think if you guys were to run something, one, it could be a great fundraiser for you. Two, it could be a great recruiting pool for you.
Yeah.
Right? Get a bunch of people and kind of see what they can do. And three, I think it could just be a great time for people to, play in a different kind of tournament, different kind of format.
Yeah, it would definitely give us an eye-opening into other new strategies people could come up with. Because that's the thing. Even in Europe, they have team tournaments, but they don't have a lot of them, right? So it's hard to and they're usually not they're not stored. You can't really get data into line of sight into how it went, because they don't usually use they might not use BCP or Wargames Z or whatever their Wargames TO version of it. Like, so in that regard, it is kind of like, it'd be a lot more interesting to see, like, bigger, more transparent team events, so we could see new strategies develop into it. Because, like, you know, for most teams, like, they're just coming up with, you know, they have no idea what they're doing. They're just like, they're just trying new things and see what sticks on the wall. So,
yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that's great. Very interesting. So, to circle, you know, back around to the Minutemen program that you guys have, did I hear you right in saying that you're taking anyone, or do you have to like apply? Do you have to be a certain play level?
There's an application process, and like the expectation is that anybody who comes to the Minutemen like is hoping to be on Team America at some point, right? Yeah. And then it's, you know, we definitely there is some culling that happens every year, obviously, because some people change their direction, or they realize like maybe that's not going to happen for them. I don't know. Like there's just like there's things that happen. But for the most part, like the team is fairly transparent and open. You just have to. The only thing we ask is like, you know, if you're applying to this, it's because you want to play on Team America at some point in the future, preferably the next event. But we get it. Like if you're not like, because we need to grow the team. We need to be like France in this sense. We need to be able to pick players and say like, all right, well, this year we decided we're going to play, you know, Bone Reapers, and we're going to pick you, Alex, as the best Bone Reaper player. We know you're the best Bone Reaper player, so we're going to put you on the team, right? Like, we need that level. Because right now, like, the way we've been doing it is mostly, like, we've just been picking the best players that are, you know, basically volunteering or signing up and that can afford it, and the mistake we make is we keep trying to make them play like something not necessarily what they're good at, because that's how we win team events. It's not necessarily winning, like playing the thing you're good at. So,
right. Yeah, which I mean, it's kind of counterintuitive, right? Because like, especially if you're like an amazing Soulblight Gravelord player, and you're like, okay, you know, you may have to change your list and stuff like that. You're still going to know the synergies. You're still going to know the, you know, the strengths of the army that you're able to adjust on the fly a little bit easier than if you like pick up Seraphon and you're like, okay, well, I guess I'm playing Seraphon, right? So, you know, not that you don't, I'm not saying that you don't know Seraphon, but it probably wasn't your natural army that you've been playing, right?
Way more practice before I even went to AOS World. Like I'll give you a context of like this is like something I kept like screwing up. I would like literally in my hero phase, I'm like, all right, don't forget to use the Fusel Conflagration. You know, tell that to myself. We get to the shooting phase, forgot to use the Fusel Conflagration. Like we just literally talked about this, Jeremy. Like, come on, like things like that. Like they're not necessarily hugely impactful, but they can have an impact. You know, if you spike, but like it's like things like that, like the nickel and diamond mechanics. Because like the problem with like armies like Seraphon, they have like 1 million rules that's can only be worked in very specific sequencing, and like either start, end, whatever. And in AOS worlds, like you better believe like if you don't do something at the start of the hero phase when you're supposed to, the other guy knows, and he's not gonna let you take it back. So like that is like, and it's okay. Like it's the premier world event. You're expected to be a very good player, and you're not supposed to just basically ask for, you know, mulligans. It's so
right.
So
yeah. Very good. So I the last question about the Minutemen. If you are interested, where do they go? Like where should they look up? Like should they tweet you? Like how do they put in their application?
So follow us on Twitter. It's the Team America AOS handle, and then there will be soon there will be a link posted with basically the questionnaire for signing up. And then if you sign up and accepted, you'll be invited to the Team America Discord, and then the start of your journey begins there, in a sense. And for the most part, like that's it. That's the learning application process. Granted, like we might not take everybody because like we're trying to not be like more than like 100 players at once in the Discord because it can get a little bit crazy. But for the most part, like last year we only got 72 applicants, and only about like a third of them ended up actually being active on the Discord. So like like I said, not everybody applies to be like to play that year. They apply to hopefully play, hopefully next year, the year after. And in some cases, some players just apply because they want to get better, and then if they feel like they can, they've learned something or have taken something away from the team, then they might like actually say, okay, maybe I'm ready to apply for the team. So.
Yeah. I think that's great, because I think there's some people that are like, oh, I'm really interested in this, but I can't do it.
Yeah. Maybe
this year or next year or something like that. But I'd love to like even get better and learn and see if it's really for me. And so I think this Minutemen program that you guys have is absolutely a step in the right direction of growing that player base, and good on you guys for instituting it and getting. I know I think. Well, I say I know, but I'm pretty sure that one of my good friends here, Sergio Ortiz, is in the Minutemen program as well. So Sergio lives just around the corner from me, but he never comes and plays me, even though I keep asking him. So I don't know if it's because I'm not good enough or if our just schedules don't align. I think it's the latter, but
Sergio's a great guy. I'm sure it's because you're not good enough. No, I'm just kidding.
All right, touche. The podcast is over. I get it. Like, oh no, I live here in the Virginia, Washington D.C. area. I am blessed to have a lot of very good players that live around me that I play with regularly, and I am nowhere near the caliber that they are, but I get better because, I guess they say iron sharpens iron. I think I'm more like a rock, and they're just kind of like polishing me, like,
oh yeah,
they're steel and they're really good, and I'm not that good, but good times though. I enjoy playing with them still.
That is my favorite part of the hobby. It's like, for the Corsairs, like we've had a lot more like interest in AOS recently because the team used to be more of a 40K team, and I've been like kind of like helping those players, like effectively coaching them through like how to play their armies and teaching them things that like are important about the game, and like that's always been my favorite part of the game is like like putting him through the dojo in a sense, right? Like it's and like so much so that like our teammate and my friend Ben Schmuggler finally won his first GT at the area open like this year after like after like a lot of basically me pounding his head in over and over and over and telling him like, what are you doing this? What are you doing? Explain to me what's your out. Like I don't understand this move, like and so forth and so forth. So in that sense, like that is what I hope Team America brings to any of the Minutemen effectively. So
yeah, that's great. Well, Jeremy, you guys, I have just two questions for you real quick. Who was your hardest opponent this last year?
Well, Team Denmark for sure. Denmark is always the hands down. Like, there's something about the Danish that is absolutely phenomenal to play against. They played the cleanest game of Warhammer you'll ever play. But
really,
they also like when they're at the table. Like for example, they don't drink during the event. They basically go in to win it big. Like they have no chill whatsoever. But they play super clean and super by intent, and they're super and like incredibly. I love playing against them. The only downside, their sense of humor could use some help. Holy God! Because you can.
That's so funny.
I'll give you a context. So like literally, I'm playing this guy, and he's just shoving my shit in. It's like all plus spoils against Thunder Lizard. Charge my entire army turn one. It's just like box me in my deployment zone, and I'm like, I look at him, and I'm like, if I make this super Hail Mary play, I could maybe like do this and like that can happen, and then I can like actually like completely turn the tables on you. Bear in mind, like that move is completely impossible. I'm just making a joke.
Yeah.
And he looks at me. He's like, "Yeah, that would be bad for me. I don't want that." I was just like, "What?" It's like in complete seriousness. Like not at all. Did not like register it as a joke. And I was just like, "Okay, well, this is gonna be a lot harder."
This is gonna be a long game.
Like, not that they're not funny. They're just like at the table. They're like bloody intense, and they have a tradition of playing almost like 400 games between each AOS worlds. Like they practice every weekend, and they just try to like they get as good as they possibly can for the worlds. Like that's because they won it in Milan, and then Unfortunately, we knocked them out of the podium when they played us because we robbed them of enough points where they couldn't podium. And then the first round opponent that we played, which was Sweden, ended up in third over them, effectively. So
wow.
So in that sense, like it is, they were the hardest. We had a lot of fun. We played a lot of great. Like I don't think there's any way to have a bad time at AOS Worlds. In fact, I'll share a little story for everybody before I go. It was the first Warhammer event where I got to see somebody arrested by the police, which was
what?
Yeah, we had an Irish player that unfortunately got into some trouble with the Prague police, and literally they came around asking people at the table, like, "Have you seen this man?" And it's a really bad photo of him, and then eventually they caught him, and because he turned himself in, he was just like he literally looked at his opponent and was like, "All right, well, I think you win this game. I gotta go deal with something." And he walked away and went to go turn himself in. And then,
oh my
god!
god!
2 hours later, came back from the police station after paying his fine and played next round.
That is hilarious, and of course it's the Irish. I'm just gonna throw that out there, right? Like, it would be less funny if it was like a French guy, but because it's the Irish, it makes it a little bit more funny in my view.
Oh my god!
So that's
proud.
amazing.
They were proud for sure. Oh my god!
Yeah.
Anyway, so
that's amazing. Well, Jeremy, thank you for coming on. I learned a lot about the Worlds. It sounds like a lot of fun. Like, part of me wants to push the Minuteman application button, but I don't think I'm there yet. Just because I've got a very busy life, right,
sure.
with like my kids and stuff like that. But I'll tell you, like, I'm keeping it in mind. It sounds very interesting, and one day I wouldn't mind jet setting off to Europe somewhere to play in a crappy part of a beautiful city. And and enjoy it. But it sounds like fun, though.
Yeah, the venue was just the only regrettable thing is the AC broke down the first day and it was very hot. Oh. And then also it's a hotel that was like communist era hotel. So like on his Wargame, I had a great joke about it. It's like as if somebody never told them the communism ended. Because that was literally the feel of the hotel. Like, holy shit.
That is too funny. You're like, hey, this is a blast from the past. I am in Czechoslovakia.
Oh my god, it was eerie. Like, it was very eerie. But anyway, yeah, it's just, there's a chance next year it's going to be in Amsterdam, which will be a great venue. So. Yeah,
for sure. For sure. Well, thank you for coming on the podcast. Very enlightening. I want to hear more about what you do. I'm following the Corsairs on Twitter. Is there somewhere else that I can follow you, or is that your Twitter handle pretty much?
Oh no, I have my own Twitter handle. It's just my first and last name. Because that's the advantage of being French with a very long consonant last name. You're pretty much guaranteed no one has it.
That's true. That's true. And I checked, and I was already following Team USA, so check on that one. Yeah, like, thank you for coming on. Like, this was great. Oh, I'm already following you.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, very good. So yeah, like, this was great. I can't wait to hear about your exploits as we go. I want to hear more about what the Minutemen are doing. So maybe as we get a little bit closer to next year's Worlds, we can check in again and see how the preparations are going and what you guys are doing. But in the meantime, don't be a stranger at the Nova Open. Let's catch up and chat for a bit. That'd be awesome.
I can't wait. All right.
Yeah, thank you very much. So for our listeners out there, thank you for listening to our podcast tonight. You can like and share this. So obviously you found it on your favorite podcast outlet, but share it with your friends and feel free to leave us some feedback. Like you said, you can contact Jeremy on his Twitter or Team USA. Team USA for AOS, and or you can hit us up at Tabletop and Beyond and on Twitter and Facebook, and we'll respond to ask us some questions, and we'll see if we can't get you some answers. So thank you very much for listening, and have a great night, everybody.